Hey guys, what's up? This is Dan Stevers, and today we're going to be talking about keyframing. And now this is one of the most basic fundamental things you need to learn inside of After Effects to really do any type of project. Doesn't matter what it is, you have to understand keyframing and how it works, so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the different types of keyframes that there are, and we're also going to talk about different types of interpolation. And that word might not mean much to you right now, but hopefully it will at the end of this tutorial. So let's just get started here. We're going to go and make a new composition inside of After Effects. Mine is 640 by 360 at 24 frames a second there, and we're going to make it 4 seconds long. Alright, we're going to make a new solid here, so we got something to play with. 360 by 360 is good. Click OK. Now we're going to go up to this mask tool right here, and I'm going to select the ellipse tool here, and then I'm going to double click on the ellipse. And what that's going to do is it's going to make a perfect circle inside of that square. And now you want to make sure that this button is turned off for what we're going to be doing. It's probably on by default. And so if it is darkened here, make sure that this little button that's called toggle mask visibility is turned off, and that will cause the edges of the mask to disappear, so you don't accidentally change your mask and deform your shape while you're working here. One thing we're going to do before we get started is we're going to go up into the preferences right here, and we're going to change our preferences to make sure that we're all on the same page here, so our keyframes are all acting the same way. So if you go up to the After Effects icon here, we're going to go to Preferences and go to General. And it's this check right here where it says Default Spatial Interpolation to Linear. And you want to make sure that that's checked. And After Effects by default, it's unchecked. So you want to make sure that default spatial interpolation is checked. So we'll click OK. Okay, now that that's checked, we're going to select our white solid down here on our timeline. We're going to hit S, and that will bring up our scale options here. And we're going to just drag this number down a little bit, and so we have a bit of a smaller sphere. We'll take it to like 40%. That's probably good. Maybe a little lower. Take it to 35%. Okay, so here we go. So this is how you make a keyframe inside of After Effects. What I'm going to do is I'm going to twirl up and then twirl down this icon right here to reset that from our scale. And you're going to want to click this little icon right here next to transform that will twirl down all the options here. And we're interested right now in the position. And the position is we're going to be moving this little ball around the screen. And the way you make a keyframe is you click this little stopwatch right here. Anything that has a stopwatch next to it inside of After Effects means that you're going to be able to animate it. So we can animate all these properties on this particular layer. But right now we're just concerned with the position. So I'm going to click this little stopwatch here. It darkens, and then you'll notice over on this side here, this is called our timeline here. It made a little yellow keyframe here. And it made it at 0 seconds by default unless you move this slider around. You can move the slider around, and you can make keyframes wherever you want. Wherever you click that stopwatch is where it's going to make the keyframe on here. So now that we have our keyframe made here, we're going to take the cursor here. We're going to drag it to actually, let's go back to the starting keyframe here, and we're going to move our sphere over. So if you come up here and you grab the sphere, you want to make sure that your selection tool is picked up here in the top left. It should be by default. We're going to go all the way to the left side of this and of the timeline. We're going to move our ball over, and if you hold Shift while you're moving the ball, it will move it perfectly horizontal or vertical, depending on which way you're going. Okay, now that we've got that set there, we're going to go to 1 second, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to drag the sphere and hold Shift, and this time you'll notice that it's creating a line right here, and this is interpolating from our first keyframe to our second keyframe. So if I take this the cursor right here and scrub it back, you'll see that it's now animating between those 2 points, which is pretty cool. So let's do another keyframe, and you notice that once the stopwatch is selected there, anytime we move the ball on the timeline here, it's going to make another keyframe. So if I do this and then do that and then move it over and then move another one, it's automatically making keyframes at all these points that I created along the way. You can also delete your keyframes. I'm going to go ahead and delete these 3 that I just made. So delete that. Now we're back to these 2 keyframes here. So I'm going to go to 2 seconds right here, and I'm going to drag it over holding shift and move it over to the side here. And now we've got what we're going to be playing around with. If we want to go ahead and see our animation, we're going to go up to this preview tab over here on the right. And what we're concerned with is this little button on the far right that's called RAM Preview. And so if we click that, it'll do a RAM preview, and then it'll play our animation back for us, and it'll loop it for us so we can watch it over and over and over again. And you'll notice that the bar up here turned green, and that means that our timeline has been rendered. If I go ahead and drag it over here and if I take like the middle keyframe here and I move that, you'll see that the green disappeared, which means it's not rendered anymore. If I hit Command Z, that undoes it. That undoes that action I just did. You can also go up to Edit and Undo Change Value at any time if you want to. So we got our 3 keyframes here. And you can also grab the work area end here. And what this little guy here does is it sets the in and out point for the animation. So now if I bring it all the way to 2, and here's a quick tip about moving this. If you hold shift while you're grabbing the end time or the work area end bar here, if you hold shift, you'll see it snap to keyframes when you're moving along, which is really helpful when you're working with a lot of keyframes, so that you don't have to zoom into the keyframe and try and line it up, but holding shift just makes it snap. So we're going to hold shift and snap it to our last keyframe there. So now when we RAM preview, it's only gonna play this section right here that we've defined. You can also grab the beginning bar, and you can do the same thing, hold shift, and you can set the in point to it too. So those are really good, so you're making sure that you're not rendering and having to watch empty space like we have here. Okay, so now that we've got that defined, let's talk about different types of keyframes. The first and one of the most important keyframes in After Effects it's called the Easy Ease keyframe. And so I'm going to select this middle keyframe here of our position. I'm going to right click on the keyframe, and I'm going to go to Keyframe Assistant down here. And now I'm interested in this one here called Easy Ease. So I'll select that one. And you'll notice our keyframe, the icon changed right here. And that means that this is now an Easy Ease keyframe rather than the default keyframe. So let's go ahead and click our RAM Preview button, and we'll see how this has changed. So you'll notice your animation looks different now. What it's doing right now is it's easing in to this middle keyframe, and it's also easing out. So it's slowing down to go into it, and then it's slowing out of it. And that's what the Easy Ease keyframe does, is that it slows it down as it gets to the keyframe, and then it slows it down as it leaves the keyframe. So it comes to a complete stop in the middle and slows down on both the front and back ends of the keyframe. We can go ahead and do the same thing to our other keyframes here. So if I select this one and then I hold shift and select the other one and do the same thing and right click and go to Keyframe Assistant and Easy Ease. You'll also notice that we can also hit F9 to get the Easy Ease keyframe option there. So that's a good tip when you're working, is just select your keyframes and hit F9. That'll make them Easy Ease. So now all three of our keyframes are easy eased. So now what it's doing is it's easing out of our first keyframe, easing into our middle, and then easing out of our middle, and then easing into our third. So it's kind of scooting between all three. And by the way, that's Lily, my cockatiel. She's saying hi. So those are the easy ease keyframes there. They're really nice at getting nice, natural, organic looking movement inside of After Effects. Let's talk about a different type of keyframe now. I'm going to select all of our keyframes here. I'm going to delete them. And I'm going to go back to 0 here, drag our marker back to 0. And I'm going to move this ball over to the left here. We're going to do the same thing before. We're going to hit the stopwatch on P to set a keyframe. We'll go to, let's go to 1 second. And I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to move it over just, not too far, just like an inch or so. Now I'm going to go to, let's see here. Let's go like 1.5 seconds. And then we'll drag our ball all the way over to the right there. Oh, here's another thing. If you're not seeing this in seconds up here, it's a chance that it might be zoomed in or zoomed out. This bar down here is how you zoom in and out of your timeline. So I can zoom in so I'm not seeing seconds anymore. Now I'm seeing frames here. So I'm seeing 8 frames, 12 frames. So that's, and you can drag this window down here, slide around your timeline. That's just a little tip while working here. I'm going to take it and I'm going to zoom it all the way back to where it was before. Okay, so I've got our first keyframe on the right side here. I've got our second keyframe that's at 1 second and it's about 1 inch to the right, and then it's going all the way to the right side of the screen. I'm going to do the same thing by holding shift, and that snaps your cursor around to the keyframes. Like I said, this is one of the most important things to remember when you're working in After Effects is hold shift when you're moving the cursor around so it snaps on to your keyframes there. So I'm going to go to the last one, and I'm going to drag this marker over, and I'm going to hold shift, and that snaps it right to it. You can also hit B and N. B moves the beginning marker, and N moves the end marker. So that's another good tip there, is you can just go anywhere on the timeline and hit B and hit N, and it'll move those markers there. That's a good tip. So let's go back to that, our third one, and hit N on it, and that sets our N marker there. Okay, so we'll hit a RAM preview, and we'll see what's going on here. So we're moving really slowly and only a little bit until we get to this third keyframe when it shoots over. So we're going to be talking about the ease out keyframe right now. So if we right click on the middle keyframe, because I want it to go a smooth transition from this middle point to here, because right now it's really jerky. So we're trying to smooth that out. So this is what the ease out keyframe is used for in this particular instance, because I'm easing out of the second keyframe towards the third keyframe. So right click on your keyframe. I'm going to go to keyframe assistant, and we're going to go to easy ease out. And this is going to be, now you'll see the marker changed to a different icon this time, different than the easy ease. So this is the ease out icon there. So now if we hit a RAM preview, you'll notice that it gradually changes the velocity from this second keyframe to the third keyframe. So it's easing out of the second keyframe into the third keyframe. Now, so that's what ease out does. Now, if we wanted to do an example where you would use ease in, if you want to know how to use that, it would basically be the opposite sort of movement. So ease in is when you want to ease the motion in from a fast moving keyframe to a slow moving keyframe. So I'm going to set keyframes here, and we're just doing the opposite we did before. So first keyframe going really fast all the way across the screen to second keyframe, and then second keyframe is only moving a little bit towards the third. Hit N there on my third keyframe. Okay, so if we right click on the second keyframe now and go to keyframe assistant and go to easy ease in, now it'll be doing the opposite. It will be gradually changing the velocity from the first to the second keyframe there. So it's easing into our second keyframe. And that's a good way to remember how these keyframes work. This one's called easy ease in, and it's easing into the keyframe that you put it on. So it's easing into that keyframe, and if you wanted it to do out, then it would be the opposite of this. It would be easing out of the keyframe that you put it on. So there you go. Those are the three major keyframes inside of After Effects. Let's try something different now. Let's talk about interpolation. So we'll delete our keyframes there, and I'm gonna shrink our white solid here a little bit. So I'm gonna go to our scale option. I'll maybe make it 25. And we'll set a keyframe on 0 for the position. We'll change our end marker back to 4. Now I'll go to 1 second here, and I'm gonna move it up. And I'll go to 2 seconds here, and I'm gonna move it down. So we're gonna be making a little zigzag pattern. Go to 3 and move it back there. And I'll go to 4 and, oh, I don't know, there, that's fine. Okay, so now we've got this zigzag pattern that our ball is doing. And we're gonna be talking about interpolation. So right now it's set to linear interpolation, and interpolation is how it reads the space between this particular keyframe and this particular keyframe. So by default, well, it's actually not by default, but we changed that at the start there in our preferences to make sure that it was set to linear. So right there, default spatial interpolation to linear. So this is a linear. Now, if you wanted it to make smooth curves around as it's going, make more of an S shape rather than like a zigzag shape here, that's going to be called Bezier interpolation. And so I am going to want to do this to all of them. So I'm going to select all of my keyframes there. I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to go to keyframe interpolation, and I'm going to select that. And we are going to be looking at spatial interpolation because it's the space between the keyframes that we're looking at. Right now it's set to linear because we set it to that, but I'm going to set it to Bezier right now, and we'll see the difference. So once we confirm that, you'll notice that all of our lines here turned into kind of S shapes here. And now if we play this, now it's making a little bit more of a smooth curve around the edges rather than hard angles. And that's what the Bezier does there. And we can adjust our Bezier points right there if we have them selected like this. And we go up to the pen tool up here. If you select this pen tool icon, you can go down to convert vertex tool here. And now if I click on the keyframes here, if I click on a keyframe, it allows me to make a new path for it. So I can grab these handles and I can make whatever sort of curve I want, whatever sort of crazy curve I feel like. So I'll just drag it out, make a nice curve. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to grab this point here and I'm going to make it a nice loopy curve there. Do the same thing there. Oh, you know what? I realized you only want to have you don't want to have the keyframe selected because every time I was clicking on one, it was doing it to all of them. So you might need to deselect all of your keyframes there and then click on your layer. And now we'll do the same thing there. We just had them all selected before, so it was doing it to all of them. So now that we've deselected them and now we're re-clicking on these handles here, we're going to draw a nice curve there. So now we got this wild curve there. And it only took 5 keyframes to get this nice curving motion to the to this ball here. So that's the Bezier interpolation, and it's really nice when you need to do a nice curve. Bezier is what you're gonna want. Now you don't necessarily have to go. You don't have to right click on this and go to key interpolation and do it that way. All you have to do actually is just select the pen tool and go down to your convert vertex tool. And if I click once on all of these keyframes, it resets them back to the default linear interpolation. So rather than right-clicking and go to the interpolation, all I have to do is grab the convert vertex tool and drag it on my linear keyframe, and it'll convert it into a Bezier keyframe. So there you go. That's the quick way to do it. Is just with the convert vertex tool. So there you go. Those are the basic keyframes here inside of After Effects. I'll show you guys one more trick that's pretty cool, and this is one that I use a lot. And what it does is I want to have the velocity remain constant between all of these, because right now it's not constant. It's going a little bit slowly towards this one, then kind of quickly towards this one, quickly towards that one, and then slowly towards that one. And you can tell the speed of it by how many dots there are there. So the farther apart the dots are, the quicker it's moving. So you'll see here, maybe it's hard to see, but I think you can see it. You can see how closely together the dots are here, and then you can see how they're further apart on this section right here, which means it's moving faster. So I'm gonna go back to my normal size here. And by the way, this is how you change the screen size here. That, or you can just roll the mouse, a mouse wheel. That will zoom in and out too. Anyways, so like I said, we're trying to smooth out all of this velocity between these keyframes here, because I want the dots to be equally spaced, because that will mean that the velocity is the same. So if I select our 3 inner keyframes, because I'm not concerned with the beginning and end. What I want are all the keyframes between, so these 3. Now if I right click on them and I go to this option right here that's called Rove Across Time. Now this is going to do what I said I wanted it to do, and it's going to space out the velocity between all of these keyframes. So if I click on that, you'll notice now all the spacing, the dots on these on this line here of our animation are all equal, which means it's going to be traveling at the same speed the entire animation. And it also will move your keyframes on your animation here. It will adjust them, so it'll scoot them a little bit each way, so it makes it perfectly smooth. So now let's go ahead and check out this animation now. Cool, now it is moving at the exact same speed across the whole S there. And that is pretty cool, because sometimes you want your animation to be constant, and this is how you achieve that with the Rove Across Time feature there. Here's another cool feature of it. We'll go back to our selection tool. If I drag the end point here, you'll notice that our Rove Across Time keyframes here, they all stretch kind of like an accordion here. And so I can easily adjust my entire animation by just selecting either the tail or the beginning there. So I can make this happen real fast here. So I'll just shrink that, and now it's flying. So look at that. Wow. I know this tutorial is about keyframing, but ultimately we're trying to make things that look good here, right? So let's do something real quick that's going to make this look a lot better. So we're going to add some motion blur to this, and motion blur acts to smooth out the motion visually for your eye. It makes it not so hard to look at, because right now our animation, I'm going to set these back to Rove Across Time, and then I'm going to bring this in here and do that, because right now it's kind of hard to focus on the ball. It kind of looks like it's strobing around the screen. So we're going to try and fix that right now, and this is a cool little tip here. So we're going to be adding motion blur to this. So adding motion blur to anything to our comp is going to be a two-step process. The first button we want to click here is in our timeline here, and it's called Enable Motion Blur. It's the little bouncing ball symbol, so we're going to click that. And then we're also going to click the corresponding icon on our layer here. So you'll see this little ball motion blur icon at the top here. So we're going to click the little icon below that, and immediately you'll see our ball now is kind of blurry looking. So now, if we do a RAM preview, now it looks a lot more like it was actually filmed with a camera. It's a little easier on the eyes, and looks a lot nicer overall. So anyways, that's just a quick tip to make your animations look better. And I would hate to leave you guys without knowing how to export your movie here, how to actually get it out of After Effects. So I'll just show you that real quick, even though this tutorial isn't about it, but we'll just do it anyways. So you go up to Composition here and go to Make Movie when you are in that window there. That'll bring up this dialog here. We'll click on the output to, and I'll put it on my desktop, that's fine, whatever. And when you're ready to go, just hit render, and then and so now that we're on our desktop, we can see our movie right here. We can open it up and check it out, and there you go. We got a animation. We figured out some keyframes, how they worked, and hope that was helpful for you guys, and I'll see you guys next time.